Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. It's me, Hank, and Melissa here, bringing you a little bit more information about the Paqo Kuna tradition of Peru. And today's core topic is going to be the animals of the tradition and how we use those animals and their different qualities in our work.
Yeah, so each direction has an animal. I think there might be a couple that might have two, depending.
Well, it all depends. Like it varies from tribe to tribe or from village to village, if you will. And there's because the way we learned originally, we had like two animals in one direction, and the way that Zane just taught recently, it's spaced differently. So it just shows the flexibility of depending on how your teacher is and how you're going to use the different animal spirits, how they might associate differently.
Oh, I mean, those animals, those little beings, quite helpful, quite useful in workings in this tradition. But not everybody always uses or works with them. Hank, I think you might use them a little more than I do at times. It kind of depends on the person for me. If I feel or see one of the animals kind of hanging around, then I know I need to work with incorporate. But I think some of our students have actively made a point, like that's the part of the tradition that they were really drawn to. So they use more often. But that's the great thing about this tradition. You don't have to every single time use every bit of information.
Right, different things resonate with different people. And the first year, I would say that when we did the Hatan Karpay and we did all the initiation work, we didn't really touch on diving into how to use the animals and their qualities of energy until what we did call the master program. And now Zane's kind of blending it. So what we're going to start with is um, well, we can associate them. Like, so we have Pachamama usually in the South in the tradition, and the animal that goes along with the South would be the Amaru or the snake. And I have my little chumpy stones here. Oop, what camera am I on? Oh, I'm on
Oh,
this camera.
you
Oh
are
my gosh, I am so confused now. I have two multiple cameras. Okay, but I'll let you. I'm gonna try to fix me. My other camera's not even showing up. Oh, this is very disappointing. Okay. Well, I hope my audio might not be the greatest because it's not the camera I thought it was. But this is a chumpy stone, and you can see here we have the Amaru, and all these kind of build on each other because it's not. Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but what would you say to the very first animal? Like, what was your like? So many people are afraid of snakes and different things like that. That when we hear like that we're going to be working with snakes, some people were like, "Ooh, I don't know about that because they're creepy crawlies or things like that." But really, the snake energy is this energy of transformation. It's this energy of being able to take action. It's an energy of being able to feel the vibration of the world around you and be in communication with it in a very instinctual level to know how you want to respond to something before you have time to analyze it even. And notice I say respond, I'm not saying react. Reacting really is more of a mental thing. Responding, like when it's innate to your intuition, is going to keep you okay. You know what I mean? It's not like reacting because of a trauma. It's a whole different thing that we're talking about when we're talking about the Amaru energy.
hmm and a thing to keep in mind, the snake is that reptilian part of the brain as well. So you can also take these animals and bring them into a consciousness and a higher level of thinking. So the snake in that reptilian brain, that quick action that needs to happen to keep yourself safe, to maybe a little bit of ego, maybe not, right? Everybody thinks ego is bad, but ego keeps you from walking in front of cars, self-motivation. So, those quick little actions that you need to do without overthinking, without over causing stress, anxiety, just something that needs to happen. It's kind of like relating it almost into a martial art. People that have those training and something's coming at them and they just throw that hand up and catch it. That's kind of that type of energy. But people can be afraid, right? Because of just how they've been perceived. But then there
Right.
are people who love them and find comfort in that winding, that tightening, because they don't feel it as constriction. They're just like, that is a nice, secure feeling of another animal.
Yeah.
So there's ways to look at that.
And I just want to take one step back for people who are joining us for the first time this week. What we're referring to and talking about are the spirits of the tradition of the Paqo Kuna tradition of Peru. So it's a Peruvian nature mysticism, and specifically the Qatari tradition, which is what our teacher Zane Curfman, author of Inka Mountain Magic, has coined. It's a cross-cultural nature mysticism. So a lot of it is based on the tradition way up in the mountains of the Caro, where they were so high up in the mountains that the Spanish could not go up there. Like they had altitude sickness, they could not go conquer those people. So there was a big part of this tradition that was preserved untouched by the modern world until just recently in the last couple. I forget when they were rediscovered, but they were rediscovered, and all of a sudden there were expeditions going up to these mountain regions. And then Zane has also brought in a lot of this coastal tradition and the things that are more around the cities and the jungles and the coastlines and different things like that. So it's like a blending of these traditions, kind of piecing together what was preserved along with what the modern world needed to change. That's a good way to put it. And that's what we're diving into now. If you go back the last 2 weeks, we talked in general, then we talked about the different spirit elements, even though they're actual spirits in this tradition. And now we're diving into animals because everybody loves animals, right?
Right. So yeah, we're kind of going over. So there's like a difference, right? So these spirits that we're talking about are kind of like traditionally used and work within this healing. But then, like, if you want to get into animal guides, there is a part in the apprenticeship where you can start working and bringing in. And we may even do a whole separate, discussion about that if you guys would like. I mean, I myself, at one point, we're going to get into a bigger cat, and I love big kitties. They are one of my animals. And then we have some flying critters, which I have bats. Are you surprised? Look at me. So, these are kind of like the ones that kind of work around in like your healing working table, if you will, because Mesa is also like translated into your working table. And then you can expand on that in your working and even with the person that you might be working with. You may see guys that they may not even realize that they have, who are giving energy and blending in and trying to help you on that task that you're working with them.
And that is actually, Melissa and I had talked about our topic for next week already. And just to kind of foreshadow a little bit, we were going to talk about the Yenapek, which is a band of 7 different guides, 3 of which are animals. And we'll leave that for next week. But this is kind of building the foundation to have a better experience when we start talking about the animals and how you use them as elements in your life, a more direct relationship, where right now we're talking more generally and how you can use these energies with your client. And as you start to get into this work, there's some deepening practices where we get into tracking, and there's all kinds of different ways you can use the energies, even when you find somebody's little shadow material and you're able to find that with the energy of the serpent or find that with the energy of the cat, and then you transcend it using the qualities of the other animals. And so like that's really the crux of it, is like there's these animal qualities, but there's also these perspectives that they each have that can add a richness to our experience with the world around us. And part of that is don't freeze. If you are in touch with that Amaru energy, when there is a threat, you're going to respond, not react. You're going to do what you need to do to keep you safe. And that's one thing that I think we misinterpret from the snake, is like, it's warning you. It's like, it's giving you a warning, like, hey, you're in my space or whatnot. You go too close, it may strike. Was that a reaction? No, it's responding to a threat. And like it's the energy of being able to take action. And how many people freeze? And how many people freeze instead of actually taking an action it's going to create a different experience for them, instead of like letting themselves be a doormat and getting run over.
Mm-hmm. Sean says, I understand. I'm familiar with spirit animals and totems, and familiar with spirits that are animals or take the form of. And animal guides would be a great stream. So we can add that to our list of things to discuss here.
Yeah, and animal totems is more of like the northern tradition. Like in that way, I have like a wolf and a crow, which are like spirits that I worked with before I even found the Peruvian tradition. And then part of the Peruvian tradition are these 4 main animals that we're going to talk about today. But they work with other ones, and maybe we'll expand on that as we go around. But yeah, keep the questions and everything coming if you have specific things that you want to hear about. But the other thing with the snake is as they grow, they shed their skin. And as we grow, we need to shed the past, and we need to shed the things that are no longer in service to who we're becoming and who we're being in that moment. And it's kind of a natural process that we can use the energy of the serpent as well to help us shed the things that we aren't going to be of use to us anymore.
And so serpents, being Pachamama or Earth, they have the ability, right, to kind of go down into that element, into the earth, to find comfort, but not to be afraid of the darkness of that element. So for some of us, it's kind of like one of the first ones you're going to work with, to start looking for the reasons and causes of why. Things that have been buried, that have rocks on top of it, because maybe you or the client are like, nah, I'd rather not deal with that, even though they need to. So that employing and working with that serpent is going to kind of help get down underneath and start kind of going, this right here, this is what the problem is. This is why it's bumpy up here. So, not being afraid and immediately, like, ew, snake, never mind. It's kind of like, okay, like, you're not required to touch and handle a snake in this tradition. But they are very helpful in getting to the root of the problem when everything looks fine on the top, even though it's not. So the snake, earth, Pachamama, generally a south position on your mesa.
Yeah, sometimes flipped with the other one, that they kind of go hand in hand because they're both navigators of the unconscious. And the next one is the puma, or depending if you're in the jungle or if you're in the mountains, it's the puma or the antarango, and they are the ones that navigate the underworld as well. I just lost my train of thought. There was a specific reason I was bridging them together, and now it just went out of my head completely. It will come back. The important thing is they're navigators of the unconscious, and both of them, when they're navigating the waters, because there's snakes that swim as well, they're really about finding, like Melissa already said, like the original imprints, the original wound, or the core wound, however you want to look at it, that are making things bubble up in your life. And think of it as bubbles. Don't think of it like an onion. Onion's like you're peeling. You're never going to get to the root if you're thinking of it like an onion, because it's not like a layered thing necessarily. It's a wound that's causing things to manifest in one's life and having these patterns. It's more like little bubbles, like a kid's bubble pipe. Like there's this core wound blowing into a bubble pipe, and there's all these bubbles coming out, and you're popping bubbles trying to get to the root of it, but more bubbles are coming. The snake, the puma, they allow you to swim those unconscious waters and find the thing that's causing the bubbles to come up in the first place. And once you start to shift that wound, a lot of the turbulence that's showing up in your waking reality can kind of subside, and you have calmer waters and different things, and learn to navigate it way more effectively.
Right. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one, and maybe some of you who are watching, we kind of all assume, ew, cats hate water. Why would you put a big cat in a water position? But in reality, if you get into actual Nature Discovery Channel, most big cats like water and will swim and will get in there and go hunting even in some of the more shallow waters, given their ability to do so. But because they are so stealthy and able to move and glide, kind of like the snake, just on big claws, right? So they are able to navigate that, and quietly, because sometimes that healing in with your client, like some of us are okay with ripping that Band-Aid off, a lot aren't. So these two animals are able to kind of like almost sneak up on it and kind of point it out and retrieve if needed in a slower, gentler way, which, granted, as you go from the snake to the cat, now you're getting a little more like, if needed to snatch, could, right? Snakes can snatch too, but bigger mouth, bigger claws, more of a snatch, depending on your situation. But you kind of get your reptilian. Now you get your more conscious thoughts. You're more able to think critically as we move from reptilian brain on over. But cats are fun. And are we going to get into the music rhythms this time? Or are we going to say
no, I wouldn't do that yet.
Okay.
Just in foreshadowing, in the future, maybe we'll go more in depth, but you can use these for tracking, and there's different different rhythms that would help. And that's really something that I don't think you can fully appreciate if you're not getting an experience around it. Like we could tell you about that, but we might, one thing we could do in the future is maybe on a new moon when we really want to dive into the shadow, or full moon, whatever feels lighter, maybe have a tracking circle at the store, and have the rattles, and like we can do a group thing, and I know Melissa probably won't want to be there because she doesn't like it when I make noise, but but like give people an experience around like what that tracking would feel like, moving between the different rhythms and things like that. But the other thing with the cat, it's cuddly. The Amaru energy, it's stalking its prey. There's almost like a little anxiety around it. But the cat, it can pounce, but it also purrs and can cuddle. And I also look at it as the snake is associated only with the lower world, where the puma or the antarango, they're able to dive into the waters, but they're also able to rise up and like climb that tree or climb that mountain. And so it's almost like a transcending thing, that once you find these wounds, you're able to latch onto them and then bring them into consciousness, and then even start to elevate them into like a more skilled expression. Because it's not about getting rid of your shadow or getting rid of the wound. It's about learning to navigate it more and more easily and in higher ways, because the imprint is what makes you. It gives you your uniqueness and all that. So it's not about getting rid of it. It's about finding it, navigating it, transcending it, transforming it.
Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people are comfortable with the big cats, right?
Yeah.
A lot more so than reptilians and snakes.
Yeah. Especially when they're at the zoo behind the cage and I don't have to worry about them jumping on me.
I am the idiot that I'm like, I want to climb this fence and go sit with the kitties. Even though they might eat me, I will love every bit of it as they rip me apart. So that would be the water, the moon, in some traditions, west. So moving in clockwise, if you will, reptilian into feline. Then we're going to hit north. Those are our right. Me too. Tigers, big kitties, big panthers, big leopard, all of them. We're up into north. We're into our flying friends. We have the condor and the hummingbird. So this is one of the ones that kind of have two. And I will admit, the first time I heard the little story about the condor and the hummingbird and the joy that it brings, part of me, I was like, you little such and such, you little creep, meaning the hummingbird. Because the condor in this tradition was like, whoever could fly up to the garden would be the winner. And so the condor just takes off and he gets up there, but he can't quite get into the garden yet. And so the little hummingbird who stole the ride on the back of the condor just pops off.
Spoiler.
Right? So I'm like, you little cheater. But there's more to learn on that story as well. But that's why we have two. Tell the story, please. Very, very quickly just did. There is more to it. But the hummingbird, the joy, the condor, the work, the big. So it's kind of like you have to do your work to get to the joy. Kind of like you can't want to win the lottery and never buy the ticket. Never going to work for you. So you have to do the work in order to get the payoff, right? Be it even in your spiritual work, in your healing work. The condor, not as cute, not as pretty, not as like, you want to pet their little heads. They're big. They are big birds, and they're kind of imposing, right? So that work is going to be daunting. And then you have your joy it makes sense. No freebies, right? Yeah. The universe just doesn't always hand you everything without doing a little bit of work, right? And I say almost always, because I'm sure there's going to be that one exception out there that will come for me if I make an absolute statement.
Yeah, the condor is about work, and then also in like the stories, the condor was the messenger of the Inca. So like if they needed guidance from the upper world, they were like, hey, condor, because Zane told at the retreat a whole nother story that was specific to Inti Raymi, and I won't go into that story because that's for a different time, a different stream, maybe next year during the solstice. But it also was the messenger going back and forth. And so it's like you can take your prayers on the wings of condor to go up to the upper world and carry your prayers and things to Wiracocha. And then the hummingbird, it's a joy to enter the garden, but it's also the ability to find the nectar in any situation. Because that little hummingbird, it goes to all these little flowers, gets a little nectar, and that nectar from even your most traumatic experience can become fuel for helping your fellow travelers or fuel for your future possibilities. But if you only see the bad, because in this tradition there is no good or bad, right? It's all relative based on where you are. If you're able to find that silver lining, that nectar in the situation, now that whole thing that was a trauma is now elevated, and now it becomes a medicine for yourself. You get the pearl of wisdom that you're able to start sharing with people. And so like they all really, you might, in order to find that nectar, you might need the wings of the condor to get that perspective of that golden tapestry and be like, oh, I see how I have a different point of view now. Because you can't solve a problem from the same level that the problem was created. You rise above it. That's condor, hard work. Let's take a different look at it. And now that we have the different look, let's find the nectar. Mm-hmm. And it all starts just kind of fitting together.
I just, because I finally saw it. You're right, Amber. Me too. I will die saying to the wrong size kitty. Hey, Divine. Interesting. I show up when you're talking about hummingbirds, my deceased mother's favorite animal. Right. My grandma, too. My grandma in West Virginia loves hummingbirds. She is that lady that has 1 million hummingbird feeders in her yard, and that brings her joy up in her mountains. So, and up in Appalachia.
You know, Anya just yesterday, she was at a park on a hike, and she was telling me that there were like these little flowers by the stream, and there was this one little hummingbird that was just going from flower to flower, and it just looked so joyful that it had all these little flowers to drink from in a place where there really wasn't flowers that a hummingbird typically would go after. And one personal hummingbird story, because in this tradition, the hummingbird represents our connection to Wiracocha because of the story that we're just kind of skimming on the surface of. The hummingbird is the connection to Creator. And there was one time when we were in, I think it was West Virginia, we were vacationing, and my son Max and me were out on the water in kayaks, and Max fell out of the boat. And the first time he fell out, we were kind of close to shore, and I was able to pull him and like brace myself grabbing a tree and pull him up and get him back in the boat. And then we're going, and now we're out in the middle, and he falls out of the boat again. And because he's eating a snack instead of holding on. You know, he already fell it once, but you know, it's not enough to learn to hold on. He's not holding on. Waves come from a passing boat or something and knock him out again. And now I realize that when I'm pulling him out, if I'm not careful and like we slip or something, I'm going backwards. He's going to stay in the water, and we're both going to be in the water. And I actually just said a prayer, very simple: Creator, help me. God help me, however you want to say it. And when I went to pull him, it felt as though like there was hardly any weight to him. And it was like, it's very easy. Like he just got lifted up and put in the boat. And I was like, whoa, that was way easy. And in that moment, a hummingbird zipped right in between me and Max, like looked me in the eyes and then took off. And I just took that as like a validation that, you know, my prayers were answered. And so these are icons too for the spirits. And when you see them in nature, when you have a prayer and then you see them in nature, sometimes it's validation that things have been answered, that the answer is yes. And look at those things just to build your confidence as you start to work with these things, that it's not just in your imagination, that when you ask the universe, it delivers. And through these animals and seeing them, maybe not a cat in the wild, maybe you just see a picture of a cat, but all these things can be validation of how we're navigating our life.
Okay, so we have our snake that gets down in there, finds the problems. We have our big kitty that kind of starts retrieving. We've got our birds that start to elevate it. So now we get over into east and we get into fire. And Hank, who's over there in fire?
Well, see, the way that Zane originally taught us, we had the puma over by the sun. You had the antirango over in the water. We had the puma over in the mountains. And the way he brought it through this last time is we had condor, maybe it was hummingbird. We had one of them in the north, and then we had the other one, I think condor in the where the sun is. So we had a little bit change. So just an example, like when I was teaching my students this last time in the mentorship program, that was a point of confusion for myself because he taught us differently. And then, but the way that he was teaching this other one, each one had one of these four. But the way that we learned, Puma, the mountain cat, because the mountain is up closer to the sun, where the other one's closer to the jungle and the waters and it swims. We had the Puma with Wilikanina, the sacred fire.
Mm. Right. Yeah. So there's been it can grow and it can change, right? Which I'm finding out right now because I did not go on that retreat. Summertime in mountain areas, bad for some people with heat issues. So did not get to go to that one. I'm like, nobody's going to have fun if I'm being hauled off in an ambulance somewhere. So
we had that one year. It's not fun. It's not good. Everything worked out fine though. So
I am the nighttime in the dark shaman. So not in the sun. I love the sun. We just have to work differently. See now Soundgarden, Black Hole Sun's playing in my head, and I'm not even a Soundgarden fan. So these are the main like animal traditions and how to use them if you're going to do like some hunting, the tracking of what the problem is. Because sometimes you might have a client who's like, I don't know, here's just all the stuff that keeps happening. I don't know why. Either maybe they really don't because they have suppressed it so much that they've kind of lost sight and they've piled a bunch of other mundane other things up on there to kind of forget or to maybe find another way to deal with it, even though it's just kind of compartmentalizing. So maybe they really don't know anymore. Or it's a traumatic experience that their mind just went, we're going to shut that away, even though it's going to keep festering and sending up these little bits of trouble. We're not ready, at least right now, until somebody and trained professionals come through and kind of start doing that work. So if you are somebody who is, right, Sandy, very in tune with animals and how to work with them, because by no means are these the only ones that you can work with in this tradition. If you have good connection to butterflies, salamanders, rats, use them and they will help guide you in how to properly, and I shouldn't say use, right, work with in your healing needs. Tammy, in Zane's last class, Puma, Trigo, West, Hummingbird, North, and Condor East. So, okay.
And it's changed a little bit over time. And that's, and then in other traditions, they call in, like, instead of wind in the north, they call in Wiracocha in the north. So like the big takeaway with these differences is they don't make each other wrong for it. If you're in one village and they do it one way and you go to another village and they do it another way, they're not going, oh, you're not a real shaman. You're totally wrong. They're not doing that. They go, cool, why do you do it that way? And they say that the gold is in the differences, and they're not there making each other wrong for it. They're celebrating why something is done differently. And that's why they say, don't relate our tradition away. When the Spanish came and they learned about guardian angels, and the Spanish are like, oh, your Apus are just like our angels. And they're like, no, your angel's an angel. Our mountain is a mountain. They're not the same. And the Chumpy stones, which I showed, like, they didn't know what they were for. Originally, they made them for the chakras. And they're like, no, it's not the chakras. We have a whole different system. And so you don't relate away, oh, you have this, which is like that. And I stopped diving in. You look at, well, what are the differences? And you look at the differences and how that difference can make you grow, and not look for it because you think you know it all, because it just related away. So they're really big on that don't discredit something just because it parallels to something you already know. You could turn off your curiosity and completely miss something that would have been life-changing.
Right. This is a really good tradition, and it gives you the openness to learn and incorporate. Because again, like how those villages would talk, it's not a replace it and you're wrong. It's like, oh, why did you do it that way? To learn something new, another way of thinking about how to handle something, rather than you're wrong, you have to do it my way. and not replacing, right? Because we have the energy centers, the nowies, the eyes. Some of them kind of line up in the chakra, but not. And they are completely separate. They are different. They act differently, and they are thought of and worked with differently. So it's not, oh, well, that's just a chakra. No, it's not. Don't treat it as such.
Yeah. That'd be a whole other separate stream. We can go over the energy centers of the tradition because they are very different. And that's a great example of how, Zane would say, like, that there's a universal truth when there are similar things, but it manifested in India this way. And, you see something similar, but not the same here. It's a sign that there is like these energy centers, but they are very different. I look at chakras as energy distribution, because it moves energy up and down, where Nawis are more like energy coming in and out. And so like they work together, but they're completely separate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. This is one of the biggest reasons why, of everything I've ever trained and learned, this is why this is an everyday thing for me that I can use over and over again and not feel like I'm stuck in a box. Here comes all of these other things in life, but yet, you can't work around it because generally you were taught to only do this. So this tradition's like, hey, learn to work around, learn to get through. It's like a way to get around life's obstacles and how to make life easier for yourself, how to ascend yourself and others around you if they're on the same path. So it's a great, in my opinion, and I am biased because I really like it, tradition. I will admit I am very biased in this, but
Me too.
I into and dabble, and I shouldn't say dabble, like I will not go where I should not, right? But I will read about and go, oh, that's interesting. Not going to do that every day. Or get into training and go, wow, this is really great if you stay right here. And I don't want to stay right here. So I can, I appreciated it, but I'm like, oh, that was great to know. What else is there?
The other thing with this tradition that I love is there's such an openness to sharing. Like here, like take Reiki, for example. I've met people that don't teach Reiki because they're afraid that their students are going to steal their clients. And like in this tradition, it's more like there's this idea that, if you make the best chocolate chip cookies, it's your duty to teach everybody else how to make the same best chocolate chip cookies, because you're going to have like better growth and better things. There's more of a collaboration over a competition. They're very sharing. They don't hold back. They want everybody. It's really from a space of being a service and not a personal gain. And there's just a beauty in that they have.
Mm-hmm. Tommy's like, I have known about my navel Nawi since early adulthood energetically. I think a lot of us as kids, especially that are drawn to certain tradition, like you have an understanding and maybe you didn't have the words yet. And so kids are so much more psychically in tune.
Mm-hmm.
It gets turned off as we all grow up, right? Because, you didn't really see that. You're not hearing that. Stop it. That's your imagination. That's this, that's that. And so we kind of teach ourselves to turn things off, close things down. And some of us just kind of kept that knowledge. We just maybe kept it to ourselves. It was like, nah, I know I'm not crazy, but I just can't talk about it with these people. And thankfully, it's a little easier now in today's time period of talking about these things in a more public manner than maybe even 30, 40 years ago.
Yep, it's getting way
admitted into a psych hospital doing what we do now publicly.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. One interesting thing when we're talking about the Nawi, the naval one, that is perhaps the most relevant one to know. It's interesting that in Peru, one of the first things they do with the child is they do a soul recovery, a soul retrieval for being cut from the mother, and the other thing they do is there's a technique to regulate the Nawi of the navel, and so like as a child, they're not just like wide open and just like being overwhelmed by. That's why we have like an empath crisis here in the North. They actually say the children of the North are walking around with leaking navels because we have not learned to regulate, not the chakra. It's not the solar plexus. Solar plexus is regulation, remember? But we have this Cusco Nawi that's just bringing in all this data, but we've never learned to like, it's like a lens, a camera lens opening and closing. It's never closed completely, but you can regulate the flow. And we don't do that. And that's why empaths are so overwhelmed. And, like learning the skill set, you're not trying to cut off your chakra. You're looking to regulate the information exchange and also not judge what you're aware of, which could be a whole nother topic. when we
Right.
talk about empaths and how this could help empaths.
Which is why, like, so much of this tradition is why, at least in the first couple of years that we did this, I would tell people, like, stick in through at least 4 to 5 months of, and if you're done, you're done. But for empaths, like that lead up, really up until like the chompi belting, gives so much empowerment of how to deal with the energy around you, what you're feeling, how to regulate, how to deal with, and step out of this victim modality of like, I can't even go to Walmart. Well, why can't you? Like, get out of that and go take care of life and go take care of business. Quit whining about it and do something about it. And so those months leading up really gave the tools for it. But we up here in the United States, like, the amount of anxiety and everything else is just through the roof. And I really feel like part of this would help a lot of people. Let's see, Chair Bear over on, do you remember your first psychic encounter? Was it gradual or sudden? I don't know if it would count as psychic, depending on what you mean as psychic, but I remember as a kid laying in bed in the one house, seeing all sorts of stuff going on in that house at night, that I would not stay in my room. I would stand outside the door in the hallway for hours because I did not want to be in there. It was the case of seeing the monsters that the adults didn't see. But then other, like, more psychic, like, I would have dreams of events happening and meeting people in dreams before they even lived in our area. Military brat, would have dreams of like new neighbors coming in and would remember that they would walk from a certain house. I'm like, well, nobody's living there. 2-3 weeks later, here comes the new family, and watching out the bedroom window, the exact thing of them walking over. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was them. Okay, cool. Yeah, mom's going to end up babysitting them. Sure enough, she does. But it was those little things. Amber says slightly different tradition. Grounding by putting navels on the earth. You can do that. That's grounding.
Yep.
Right? There's a fun, did Zane teach that in this last one, where to get the answers from Pachamama, how you can lay down and feel what the answer is through the navel? Or
I don't remember. I don't recall if he did that or not. I mean, I also think, like, when you ask me that question, like how you learn how to have a dialogue with your Apu, which is also Pachamama. They call even an Apu is a masculine spirit, but they say it's the breast of Pachamama. So even the masculine in this tradition, it is an all feminine tradition. Just to say that again, I don't remember if he did or not. Honestly, it's kind of a blur.
All of the classes blend, but I just know those last couple tradition or retreats, I should say, I didn't do because they were in summertime and away from air conditioning, and bad things would happen. So Chair Bearer wants you to answer the same question, Hank.
For me, I was the type of person who I didn't see things, I didn't hear things, I just knew things. I just had an intuitive knowing of stuff, and I didn't see stuff till way later. When I started to see stuff is when I started drinking. And then I tried to make it go away. And that didn't work, by the way. But I have the ability to see even with my physical eyes, like spirit, when it's really relevant. But I told spirit, like, a mouse runs across my kitchen floor and I freak out. I can't handle that. Please don't show me something that I don't really need to see. And so, like, it's far and few between, but I'll have it in my mind's eye and I can see stuff like that. But for me, it was always knowing. And then I got into trouble later in life when I started to judge what I was aware of. That's when I really got foobarred, because I wasn't just aware of stuff, I was judging everything that I was aware of, and that judgment polarized it within myself, and then I crashed and burned. I became a professional drinker for years. I've now been retired for like a long time, drinking like 17 years, I think 18. I've been sober. What's that?
Said I like how you stay retired.
Yeah, I'm a retired professional. I was really good at it, and I had to give it up. I perfected it, and I didn't need to do it anymore.
I will say, just as somebody who I have a lot of facilitators, right, running Goddess Sealy, that the number of facilitators, healers, readers who are recovering, and everybody's story was, I was trying to turn the voices off, or I didn't like what I was feeling, or I didn't know how to, and I'm like, this is a very interesting, in the beginning of realizing that, this is interesting. Now I'm like, oh yeah, this all makes sense now. Like why and how to deal with. And we, at one point, I think you were a part of it, we did like some podcasts on recovering psychics. you
We
know.
did. I think it was me, Jim, and Brittany.
Hmm.
I think. Yeah, it was a really good conversation. And I think people wanted a part two to that, and we never did it. So maybe now that's a good reminder to
It
look
was
at
hard
that.
getting everybody's work schedules and everything
Yeah,
to line up.
true. Well, whoever can do it, we can just because there was something huge like when you talk about alcoholism and addictions and different things like that. You think it's to cut like you're just cutting off your conscious awareness, but everything is still happening other than consciously, and it definitely made things worse in the long run. And I'm very glad that I was able to get back in touch with God because when I say God, I mean I don't mean the Christian God or anything like that. It's like the divine
Mhm.
because you separate yourself completely. Ego is edging God out, and it's like ego on riot, and you're just like just thinking you're alone in the world and having to do everything yourself, and you're just rowing your own boat and you're going in a circle. But once you get God back, good orderly direction, the other half of the boat starts getting rowed, and you're moving again, like where you're supposed to be going. So that's kind of like my take on the addiction of like you cut yourself off completely. But that's why so many of us become healers because we cut ourselves off, and once you get that back you have a different appreciation for it
Mhm.
and a capacity to help others reach that without having to go to the same self-destructiveness as you did.
Well, and you have a whole understanding of why somebody chose that route.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe like somebody like me, right? Because I'm not in recovery. I have a different understanding of it where you have a firsthand experience of it. So generally, if I have somebody come in and ask and say, "Hey, I need some healing work," and in this conversation of trying to problem solve of who's going to be the best person for them, if they mention any sort of addiction at all, I'm like, let's go talk to Hank, or Hank will be here on Thursday, or call him and he can, work with you outside of Thursdays, because I know you have a better and different understanding than somebody like myself. Hey, Ren's like recovery helped me reconnect with the divine as well. And Tommy said did that for many years and turning off the voices and energy, and now sober 26 years. And congratulations everybody on sobriety. Let me see. Blew me open, continuing to drink and use. Took my trip to the psych ward at 28. So that we have gotten way off the original
Well,
topic.
it's okay.
Okay.
This is spawning so many future live streams because we also, when we talk about alcohol, we can start talking about entities, which is a huge thing. And this tradition definitely gives you tools to work with entities because when you're drinking, they call it spirits for a reason because the spirits come and mess with you. And I don't mean like the good spirits, like you have people like cause spirits, we call them the tradition, or if you have earthbound spirits, so they see someone drinking, they go, oh yeah, I like that. I liked it when my body felt like that. And they might hang around you because they like the vibe that you're having. So it really, that's what my experience was. I just got entity ridden. So it was not getting sober and getting energetically purged and just getting to the point where it's just me, myself, and my soul. And we could probably talk a couple of streams. We got the Yanapak we're going to talk about. We got the Nawis we're going to talk about. We got entities and spirits we can talk about. So this is all good stuff to show what directions we can go in for our future streams.
Yeah, there's so many tangents and other ways that we can go. And this is kind of an example of what happens during the apprenticeship with Zane. Depending on the questions asked and the people in the group, each apprenticeship looks different because of what needs to be addressed by what was asked, of who needs what in each one. So let's see. So yeah, I think we need to start having a little notebook nearby, like address this. And I'm just looking and I'm like, I do not have the one that
Well, next time we will have a Google Doc open while we're doing that. We can both just talk and add to it. But as we're talking about this, let us know in the comments, like, what do you want to hear first? Like, of these things we're talking about, we can direct next week to kind of go more in the direction that you feel inspired to go. And then also we're looking to get Zane on from time to time and talk about, you can hear it directly from, the founder of Wild Hearts Medicine Society, where his goal is to help like bring the sacredness of your own backyard to you, to help you appreciate. You don't have to go to Peru to learn this tradition. That's my big thing. I brought the teacher to me, and with Melissa's help, we had a place to host it. And what he's been charged with, help people find the sacredness in their own backyards, because it's all divinity. There's no one place that's more or less divine, but what's right in your own backyard is accessible. And learning to work with that here, you can go and work anywhere else. And it's like you don't have to go somewhere to to really learn this tradition.
Right. Because, and I think we touched on it briefly, was it last week or maybe the week before, the tradition says like there's going to be higher level healers coming from outside of Peru anyway. So the more that this tradition is taught around, the more likelihood that somebody else not of Peruvian descent is going to pick this up and do great things and help, heal the world as a whole. While, the rest of us, we're all still doing great work. But it's just like spreading that word, because ultimately it's to heal the earth and everybody around us. So this is a tradition that's very open to like teaching and showing and bringing others in. And by no means do you have to go through. Like I said before, the whole apprenticeship, take what you need, what works for you, and you can always revisit later. It's just if you want to go through the whole thing, it does build. You can't pick and choose, because if you go 1 through 3 and you skip 4, 5, 6 and try to come in at 8, you're going to be a little bit lost by what's being referenced and what's going to be talked about. Right. And so that's the thing. Tom is like, I was very aware of energy forms, entities when drinking in bars and seeing them channeled directly through others. So a lot of people, and what will happen, and Hank, I don't know if you probably can talk about this better, that while some people would take alcohol to try and turn things off and ignore things, at least for like me, because I'm so like grounded and protected anyway, the alcohol helps bring down some of those walls to where it's easier for me to pick up on some certain other things and to be in a bar with that, did you prefer drinking at home or at a bar because of things like this, Hank?
Yeah. So like when you start to drink, and it lowers that threshold, like you're more prone to being subjected to entities. And I see another question that's kind of in line where I'm going to go, like the difference between spirit entities and ghosts. There's like ghosts, earthbound spirits. They might be like one thing you have to worry about at a bar. Like say Uncle Frank is there and Bob just passed away and loved to drink, and he's there with Frank and he sees you and you have all kinds of similar stuff that he had going on. He just wants to hang out with you. You may have tag-alongs, if you will, that want to follow you home. But then there's also things like, I think that's way more likely is like cause spirits, where it could be like well, actually, there's a whole bunch of different job spirits. We could go down a whole rabbit hole with this, but at the end of the day, when you are more able to notice spirits, or we have no awareness, either way they can attach and latch on. Sometimes if you can become aware of them, they get excited. They're like, oh, this person knows that I like. If they want to have more interaction once that you throw awareness their way. But alcohol either can make you a little bit more open, like it does for Melissa, or it makes you completely unaware, and then it's like a free for all. And you want to, if you're going to be drinking, you want to go in with some Florida water, with some sage, and like really set the intention that you're going into the bar and you're going to cleanse yourself going in. You're going to surround yourself with that light. Go in consciously to those situations, so you don't end up having like cause spirits whispering at you to try to. They can't take over your will, but they encourage you to do the actions that they like. Like, just take one more drink. I really like it when you drink that whiskey, for example, and you really just want to be more mindful. But there's ghosts. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, to make it kind of like an easier breakdown. So if you think of like spirit entities, like that's a general, right? And then if you start breaking it down to the different kinds. So ghosts are spirit. So, and this is where, because Chair Bear, I know you've listened to some of the things with Marianne, and sometimes you maybe noticed that I kept quiet depending on certain things she would say. Because Marianne, we share very similar, and then she's got somewhat different beliefs in certain systems than I do. And that's just because of the different type of work that we do. So cause spirits are what she would consider the earthbounds, the ones that have not crossed over. And they're called cause spirits because they cause problems in your life. So when she would say how recovery centers are full of ghosts, these would be those cause spirits that are making it hard for somebody to come out of recovery and stick to their determination of like, I'm never using again, I'm never drinking again. But then they would always fall back, because this earthbound cause spirit follow them home. And I only do this because depending on what name you want to call it. And cause them to slip back. That entity can no longer partake in that alcohol. So the closest they're going to get to enjoying it is by causing you to slip back. So they cause that, but they are part of that spirit realm. So it's like individual little types of spirits that are all in one big category of spirit, like entity, if that makes sense, to kind of help break that down. Or tag along. They followed you home from the bar. They followed you home from your buddy's house, who was like maybe the one handing out the drugs, like, oh, okay, well, this one looks fun. I'm going to go home with this one for tonight. Cause that argument between husband and wife or whatever. But yeah, it's a big category and different little things in there. And depending on what you believe in your previous religions, maybe that you're comfortable accepting and calling them.
Yeah, but that's a good point. Earthbound spirits could be cause spirits, but not all cause spirits are earthbound spirits. And one other example, you may have like if you practice hoodoo or any sort of spellcraft, say you have a mojo bag or some other casting that you didn't decommission at the end, like this spirit because mojo bags are essentially, you're creating a job spirit, a job entity to go do something. And once that job is done, if you don't decommission it, and it could run rampant, and then now it's going and it's doing its job to other people, not just the one that you created it for. So like that would be another example of like a potential spirit that could be like a cause spirit. And there's a lot more examples. I'll just give the one because that could be a whole nother stream in and of itself if you really wanted to dive into all the different types of entities that you could encounter.
And that's kind of stepping a little bit outside of the tradition.
I know, but I just want to give one example.
Just throwing that out there. But we may even have to have a whole separate, like, not tradition related, but here's what we've ran into in the course of life.
If we do this every Thursday, eventually we'll be like, we're really bored talking about Peruvian stuff. Let's talk about other stuff. But like but the thing is, the tradition is the container that all these other things can go into. Just like Wiracocha, I look at that as container God. It is that which holds the playground for all the other religions and things to happen and to be there. Like, is that energy. So like the tradition in a way is a container that you can put in anything else that you work with, and it can be an addition to it.
Sorry, catching up on the back end of Twitch. Let's get the shout outs running. So feel free. We want you guys to ask questions, pop in with comments, because that's helping to steer the conversation. Let us know, what you want to hear. Chair did say she would love to hear about all of our stuff. Sean's like, creating entities is a very, very dark practice, not for the newbies. Correct.
Now, to be clear though, like I don't like when talking about like a mojo bag, you can make a mojo bag with an entity that is for a good thing, like causing illumination for someone to see a problem, for example. So like the entity or the job spirit is for the job. What we're empowering it with could be either way, but either way, it's not for noobs is the point. But I would hope that nobody's going out making dark entities to do stuff. It was just an example.
Right. You can make healing entities. You can make even just simple, like you got a child that's struggling in school, maybe due to learning disabilities, whatever. You can make a little area and a little entity to help with like memory, recall, study, learning. The important thing is, and this is why I don't create many of those, because I am not going to remember to do ritual care and maintenance. I love this tradition. Because I just know me and my life is too chaotic to burden in a way by self-choice of being self-employed and all of the people that I manage. And, so I'm like, I know I will not do fair justice in creating these little things and then not taking care of them. We're going to do a much better job at that, which is funny considering it's hilarious to me, actually. So Chair asks, if you create it, does it expire or linger forever? And that's a you question, Hank, because you.
Why is that a me question? You took the same training as me. No, like It really depends on the tradition, I suppose. Like, and it depends on how good the practitioner is when they make it. Like, if you create something and it's like a truck going downhill, eventually it's going to go downhill and it will coast and eventually will stop. But I mean, if you are really a potent creator, it will have an energy of its own, and you would want to make sure you take care of it, decommission it, honor it for its job, and say thank you, you're released or whatever. And uh, you don't want to not do that. If you like with the mojo egg particularly, you feed it every week. Like you continue to say thank you for what work you're doing, and like you have a whole separate powder that you'd make, and you feed it, and you continue to nurture it. And what sometimes happens is people who don't recognize how serious making this is, it's like a commitment. It's like having a baby. Like you need to feed it. You need to take care of it. You need to change its diaper, like all this stuff. So if you're going to go to the lengths to create something like that, you better take care of it and give it a proper ending when its purpose has been done. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, they get agitated, and then you got to deal with that. And that is definitely for a different stream.
Yeah, I really, depending on how big of a spirit you're creating and how long you worked with it, like they can fizzle out, or they can cause problems for you later. Like, hey, remember you didn't refill, my water. You didn't, put some little shavings in my bag. It just kind of depends on the little spirit, and that's why I generally don't create like the mojo bags or whatever, unless I'm making it for a specific person, and just the knowing is that they need this, and also knowing and understanding they will upkeep with it. But generally, I don't fall into a lot of making. I do a lot of my working with the mesa or in candle transformation type stuff versus carrying something around.
Yeah.
Can you accidentally create entities? And this is a fun thing. This is where you can get into those thought forms of like, is Nessie real or not? Or is it became a thought entity because so many people believe it's there?
Yeah, which happens a lot when people pass away. You have a whole room full of people who are remembering somebody who just died. And sometimes what I perceive as a ghost or earthbound spirit isn't that at all. It's kind of like a created echo of consciousness of the person who died, and like, but it's being fed by that person's grief. That it's almost like whatever they need for healing, like they're carrying around their own little part of that person who passed, but that person's gone and they're fine. But it's like this new entity that feels like them, but it really isn't. And that's kind of an accidental thing based on collective intent and consciousness.
Yeah. Like a shade, maybe.
Oh, we're going real deep now. Yeah. Shades and specters. Oh my. Yeah, that's. Well, with Halloween coming up, maybe we can have a fun stream like that. We can plan one.
There's been times where I've wondered, I'm like, if we had this type of conversation, what are the odds I can get Marianne to join us?
I don't know.
May or may not. I think she would just shake me the whole time.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she would disagree with a lot of what I say.
And she knows what I do, and she's fine because neither one of us try to overtalk the other. And it works for her. She helps tons of people and families in her work. There's just certain little things that we might disagree on a little bit, and that's fine. But let's see. Amber's like, I vote for the end of the episode. Let's see. Tommy's like, took about 30 minutes to acclimate to your energies, but so glad I decided to watch your show. Well, thanks for hanging in there.
Me too. Tommy's actually one of the current students in the mentorship program, one of the proteges for one of the other teachers. So thank you very much for joining us and tuning in.
Yeah, hanging in there with us. Let's see, making sure we didn't miss anything. Bringing in so many validations from my own experiences over the years, right? And if we were to plan that one out, say like, hey, in 2 weeks we'll go over this, whatever, and like, hey guys, like try to remember between now and then, like anything that came up, and like if you're comfortable sharing them in chat, we can kind of like, hey, you were not crazy. That really did happen, despite what maybe mom, dad, grandma, auntie said was like, no, that's just your imagination. No, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, Amber too is one of the people in the program, as is Liza. She's one of our mentors as well. And Amber's one of my proteges. So thank you for being in the group. we have a really great group this year. It's been really rewarding working with everybody, but it's also like juggling so much in the air when you have like, I don't know how Zane like has 20 people and can keep it straight. I have 8 people, and it's like sometimes just like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get everybody to be on the same page. Like it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, when I do any sort, it's like 1 or 2 at a time, just because I have the store that I'm keeping track of too. And I don't want to do the disservice by not keeping everybody on the page. So, there's a couple, maybe on the next round. But, and I told many people, they're like, well, we want to learn from, I'm like, if you're going to learn from me, you've just got to hang around and watch and ask questions. Because for me to sit down and do actual classroom, I am that old type of teacher who, you make me repeat myself, I'm going to mess with you now. Like, clearly you're not paying attention. Like I'm that old guy that'll reach over and like bop you on the head with a book. Like, did you read it? Did you try? I'm the mean old one. But at the same time, like in previous ones, when we were still doing everything in person, there would be, a couple of them who would be like, can you explain that again? And it was just in the wording that was used or the examples that were given, like we just needed to rephrase it for them. And I was perfectly fine in doing that. Can I ask what category a shadow person would fall in? Are they bad? No. Well, where we go back and forth with Maria.
Everything is case by case a lot of times, and like what I perceive as a shadow person might be different than what Melissa perceives as a shadow person. And so like you have to have an agreed upon vocabulary and definitions of what all these things are, because what might be a shadow person to Melissa, I might identify as a specter or a cause spirit or something. So when we do end up having that conversation, we do need to be careful. Like, well, what does that mean to you versus me? Because we might be calling things slightly different, and it's just important to go over it.
Yeah, because for some people, maybe if you are just starting or have a beginner's ability of like seeing things with your eyes, sometimes they will all look like just shadows. So, it really isn't good or bad. That's just how you're perceiving them to start with. So, and sometimes it's just as simple as that. How do we overcome being misunderstood? Clear communication. And sometimes, what is that saying, Hank? If the other person chooses not to listen, like it's their problem, not your problem. Like, well, you can explain yourself only up to a certain point. If they're not ready for the message, they just never will understand it.
Well, that could be part of it. There is something to be said for communication style, because like if you look at neurolinguistic programming, NLP, people have different ways they receive. So if I'm talking to you and I'm saying, do you see what I'm saying? Can you see what I'm saying? Like I'm talking visually in the visual cues, but maybe that person's auditory or needs to have it written down. So there's a lot to be said, or they're kinesthetic and you need to speak in feeling metaphors instead. So like you do want to look at the people, and are they just missing each other because of communication style, or is it something else? Or it doesn't matter what you say, they're never going to pick up what you're putting down. And then at that point, it's just your responsibility to be as authentic and as transparent and as clear as you can. But there's work to do on the other side of the fence too. And then your job is to let go of the need to be understood.
Right. So
there you go. Foreshadowing.
Always go to, like, if this is a teacher student, it could be a learning versus teaching style. Right. Which is what was happening when others would come after, the weekend, like, can you go over this again? And it was just a teaching style. Or is this a need of you are delivering a message that the other person didn't ask for and didn't need, didn't want? Good example of, somebody knocking at my door wanting to talk about a certain deity up in the sky. No, I don't want to hear it. Why are you bugging me on my Saturday morning at coffee time? So it's just kind of like, what's the context around the misunderstanding?
Yeah.
And
why? I was going to say, why are you saying it? Is it for your benefit or theirs? If it's for theirs, then like, are you imposing?
Right. So, because I truly do believe that Creator, God, Spirit, whatever you want, is going to jumble or make it help kind of like keep that message that they don't need to hear from getting through. Because they don't need it. It's not for their highest. If it's solely to help you, feel better about yourself for whatever reason.
And remember too, you're launching something, it's going through your filters, and then they're receiving something going through their filters. So what you launched and what they receive, it could be distorted. And that is all shadow work and finding your own imprints, and where like your pure light is going through the stained glass and all they're receiving is red when you send out, pure white. So like that's just another way to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Is there a certain guardian or Paqo nature spirit or process that can help with the relationship problem? The relationship in like the communication misunderstanding, or what relationship problem?
Because that could go a lot of different ways. And I know we're overtime. I'm fine with being overtime. I'm just mentioning it so we are aware of it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, we went from having 10 more minutes to now we're over.
Yeah, but like with the relationships, like a guardian spirit. I mean, if you share a birthplace, there could be like the spirits of your birthplace, and there are the four guardians like in the tradition, and that's all stuff for different streams. But I would go with your Yanapek. Like if your peeps talk to their peeps, that could create a lot more smoothness, and that type of thing. I think that's really a case by case basis of what will create the most in terms of a relationship, and like what spirits to engage with.
There were certain techniques, and now I don't know what to say like in this weekend, because it changes every time there's the apprenticeship. And I think for us, it was part of the master program where it was kind of literally taking our aura, throwing it over the other person and kind of mending or merging the two.
Yeah.
At times I find that helps because now you are kind of sharing the space and you can get a better understanding of what their whole being is and what they need. And it might help change how you are communicating, be it like, instead of just talking, are you now also kind of like doodling pictures out? Are you just simply going for a walk to shut part of that brain down to where now the subconscious is picking up subtext and stuff? So it's like, rather like the spirit of them, another way of joining in with them to, become a more one solid being to communicate with yourself in a way, back and forth what needs to be gone over. But this perfect example is why I've always been an advocate of a lot of in-person training, because some people just cannot sit there and do everything online. Like it just doesn't click. They're hands-on, they are showing, they're in person. So that's why this is kind of like melding. And then we were hearing for some people, the intense weekends were like overwhelming for them, where I love it, but they needed breakdowns. So it's kind of being restructured a little bit.
Yeah. And to your point, when you're in person, your bubbles are touching, there's information exchange happening on different levels, which can happen online, but it's not as organic, I guess is the word I want to use. And the thing you're referring to is, I believe you're opening up your Wiracocha egg first. You open up the other person you're working with as a client, and then you throw like a blanket of light over them. And that helps to create a merged bubble when you're working with them. And if you're doing that with a person that you're not communicating well with, I can see where you might be disempowering the filters that might be skewing things when you're sending and receiving data. Because you now have this unified space, and like clear communication, I think would be more probable if there's like but like all that has to be going in with both people really being in awareness too. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's not an easy answer.
Mm-hmm. It feels like one of the Paqo path is for increasing self-knowledge and knowing the self as divine as part. Yeah, it's very, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You didn't realize you didn't know. The people around you, like you will become so aware of so much that you either didn't notice you didn't pay attention to, or that you had the assumption that you thought you knew. This is definitely a path for some people that can cause a lot of change. I think it was like the third weekend for us in the beginning that, Zane's like, you may start to lose people in your life. And you're like, what? Nah. Oh my God. By the end of it, I was going through a divorce.
Well, and that's something to be said, and it's not a bad thing. Like people will think that, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to lose the people around me." But it's a thing of what I would say congruence. You are coming into alignment, body, being, soul, minds, and beyond, whatever you are. And as you come into that congruence and you start to walk your path and start to step into your authentic self, it can create a rift or a gap with people who are not stepping into authenticity. And it's it's like a natural thing. So that don't necessarily, if you're wanting to do that, don't look at it as a scared thing. It's like all part of, as you line up your path and your life and your destiny and all that stuff, like it's natural for things that are not going to serve that to fall away. And it's a disservice the other way too. Like if you can't drag people with you, you know. And I it's just something that, you know, the people that are meant to be there, they're going to be there. It's going to enrich your connection. And the things that aren't supposed to be, it will be a natural, it might be sad, it's a natural falling off. And it's not something that I would say to be afraid of. It's something that's going to further your empowerment in the long run. It just might not be fun in the moment.
Right. And let me clarify, this did not cause divorce.
Yeah, that's
it was a self-reflection and realizing self-power to no longer put up with what I was putting up with. So that it was okay to step outside of that and not drag that person with me. So, and some people have changes that are not that dramatic. So, sometimes for myself, the Paqo path is like having a past life review while alive. Most lost moments become available and understandable, right? So,
well, that's a good circle back to the beginning. The hummingbird lets you find the nectar in all things. That's what this tradition is doing. It's letting you find the Sami, the light in everything. So you don't have to shut your door or be ashamed of what you've gone through. It all can become a tool and medicine for you, for your fellow travelers, for sharing on a live stream. It's all about empowering the past in a different way.
Right. Not being ashamed, not being just like, hey, here's what I went through, here's what I've learned, and here going forward, how I will know better on how to approach things. And still realizing that what you think you might know now is going to change as you keep learning and healing. And, you know, again, it's not a closed, this is the only way that you will ever do it. It's here's what's working right now. And as you learn, like, okay, now we do this and it works better.
Yep. You really make it your own as you move forward. You get the basics, but it's really you customize it, and it really becomes your own living tradition. Like it's got its roots with the Karo, but it's really its own, it becomes your own in a lot of ways.
Right. It's not evil. The tradition is bringing out the issue to be resolved. When the bad things happen, it's not because it's malevolent spirits. It's helping you digest, right? And so here's the argument too. Are those spirits really evil, or are they just serving that purpose in that time spirit for you, right? So when our kids are little and we as parents are yelling at them in that moment, they don't like us. That doesn't make us bad or evil, right? It's like, well, we told you not to touch that stove, you know? So again, are any of the spirits ever bad, or are they just here serving that purpose to teach us to be better people, to be better humans?
You don't blame a fox for eating a chicken. It's what a fox does, and the entities are doing what they do. But in the grand container of things, it is all about giving you contrast. Because in the to quote Neil Donald Walsh, in the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. So all the negative quote unquote experiences are just giving you contrast to have this dualistic experience, and it's not good or bad. It's like what you choose to make of it and who you choose to be in creationship to it.
So,
all right. Well, now we're almost 15 minutes over. How good.
Only a mile down the road, so to get there for work.
Yeah, but please let us know in the comments, where do you want us to go next? I know people are saying entities. That will be a separate thing maybe for Halloween coming up. But like in terms of the tradition, what we talked about, let us know what you think. Oh, that's my cousin Anna's tuning in as well now. Hello, cousin Anna. She was just saying, good morning. Love listening to you both, hummingbirds and dragonflies. Oh, dragonflies is another big one for me. They seem to be coming to me right in front of my face and stare at me as if they are gifting me some type of energy or healing. That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been amazing how much support and interaction we've had. So I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, and we do this every Thursday now, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So join us when you can.
Mhm.
It's fun. It's great. We like doing it. Yeah, I think we'll have to take that whole end and like start breaking it down ahead of time so we can stay a little bit on track for that one. That one might require some planning and maybe a slightly longer one, depending on how you want to get into that conversation. Great stream. Right. So I know we would do like the ghost talk on Wednesdays at 10 with Miriam, but she's taken a slight break. So Woo Woo Wednesday is kind of becoming Woo Woo Thursday ish. We're under the umbrella, just not only earthbound. So
Yeah, we'll talk about anything, pretty much.
Legally,
of course. But thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, and join us next Thursday. And
all right.
get out the door.
Yep.